Hello, I am Max, the boyfriend,
I'm Celie, the girlfriend.
and this is the podcast that comes out every Thursday where I make Celie watch things that she otherwise wouldn't. This week we're going to be talking about American Psycho. So what did you think of this?
This was such a strange movie.
I'm not really sure what brought it on us watching this. I mean, it was you kind of asking me if we should watch this, and we'll get to the reasons why. But it's kind of a random topic to be talking about this week. There's plenty of other things that are coming out. I mean, we're still watching Game of Thrones, but when we first started dating, you talked about how you liked ambiguous, open-ended stories where there could be a lot of different interpretations. And this is the first movie that I thought of.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of like those, but it's just so weird because I first started to try and read the book American Psycho, but it's written in such a way where it almost feels like the entire thing is a run-on sentence, and it's really hard to
Yeah.
comprehend what I'm reading because everything is just like a like listing everything off, and it starts out. It's like being in his mind, which is just bananas.
Yeah.
And I put the book down and I asked you, I was like, should we just watch the movie first? Maybe it'll make it easier for me to read the book. And then after I watched the movie, I'm like, I don't need to read the book anymore.
I have to be honest. I can get into many of the stories as to, as I was reading the book, but I don't think it's a good book. Like you said, there's a lot of run-on sentences, or there's a lot of what feels like run-on sentences. There's an entire chapter about Whitney Houston or Mariah Carey or just someone, and he talks about how great their music is. It's we should just get into the whole story and all the spoilers in it. So if you haven't seen this movie, definitely go watch American Psycho. I think it is worth watching, but I think the whole point of this movie is to first show a psychotic murderous person and juxtapose them against Wall Street assholes and show that somehow Wall Street assholes are worse, but also just to show the audience this psychotic person and not explain anything about them and just have the audience be in shock and awe at this person. But what was your takeaway with this character of Patrick Bateman?
He seemed like a very confused man.
Yes.
Like he didn't understand his bloodlust. He knew he wasn't really like anybody else and he had to mask himself so that he seemed normal, but in reality he never really actually came across as normal.
No.
And I don't think he ever actually did, but he just so happened to be in a societal position where it didn't matter if you were normal as long as you're rich, and as long as you got a pretty fiance on your arm, you don't have to like her. You don't have to love her. You just have to be at the top.
Right.
The alpha male type.
And that's something I brought up earlier, is juxtaposing him against this Wall Street world, because everyone in this world is narcissistic and judgmental and lacks any kind of empathy. Like every character in this movie is that way.
Yeah.
And I can't think of a single person who's, I don't know, normal. Maybe his receptionist, what was her name? Jean? I have no idea. Oh God.
What was her name?
Yeah, Jean.
Yeah, okay. She was relatively normal, but was she? Because she received constant criticism about things that had nothing to do with her job, about what she was wearing, how she looks, and then agreed to go out with him to his house and out to dinner with him after seeing what he's like. So was she really normal?
Well, I kind of equate that to just, like I said, that world. And I guess people accepting men acting like that in this world.
You acted like that.
Oh,
I would not be here right
I'd
now.
be smacked upside the face.
Oh,
if I said,
more than that.
yeah, you could dress better. Like, I wouldn't be in a bed at all.
No, and you wouldn't have anything to fill your shorts with either.
No. That's a lot of aspects of this the whole movie is just showing you a bunch of really terrible men, and they're making anti-Semitic remarks, and they're talking about how women have no personality. It's ridiculous. And the one person calling them out is the psychopath.
Right, because he's like, you guys are supposed to be the normal ones. I'm supposed to be like you right now.
Yeah.
And I'm even calling you out on your bullshit, even though it's the same bullshit I'm posing as. I know it's bullshit, but I have to fit in. But you guys are pricks.
and there's even the line of how, he doesn't like his job, and his fiance asks him why he's doing it. And he's just like, I want to fit in. That's the most important thing to me, is fitting in, other than satiating this urge.
And then the urge just keeps getting worse and worse and worse throughout the movie, until he is literally breaking down because he just doesn't understand like what is happening and how it's gotten in such control over him. Because at the beginning he was very controlled and this is my routine. This is what I do. I'm walking you through my routine I do every single day. And then that got thrown off a little bit, and then he started doing whatever he needed to do to satisfy that urge, that bloodlust urge, which most men would go on a certain site that will remain nameless. But he decided to go straight to the thing that most people think about but don't actually do, because we have consciousness.
Well,
consciences.
Consciousness
No.
is
We have Jimmy Crickets on our shoulder. He don't.
But that's another thing that they do very, very strangely in this movie, is he's very suave in the beginning, and he's he's like playing it off like Bond.
Talks like he has an upper denture in his mouth.
Yes. And then as it goes on, the actor starts acting like Jim Carrey more and more.
He reminded me of Jim Carrey a little bit, and I was like, I know this is under horror and crime according to what it's supposed to be about, but it's kind of a comedy because of how ridiculously bad he is at killing people. He just keeps happening to get away with it.
There are plenty of people who, say that this movie is a horror or a thriller or a crime movie, but I will die on the hill that this is a comedy.
It's a spoof. It's definitely a spoof, because I've seen horror movies, like genuine horror movies that have scared me, or it was serial killer movies like The Lovely Bones. Yes. Like that is a good commentary on depressing, man. I know, but it was good. It was like, it felt more realistic. Or I guess this one could be more realistic because not everybody's going to be good at murdering people and getting away with it all the time.
Well, he barely even tries to get away with it, and we will get into all the spoilers of none of this probably even happened, but just everything about how he starts going crazy. And then there's that not a montage, but the sequence towards the end where he just sees someone on the street and he shoots them. And then he enters a building and then he shoots the guy. And then the cops are after him and then he shoots their car and then it explodes.
And then he looks at the gun like, how did that happen? How did I just do that? Happened? Or another thing that was weird, he was like hallucinating because he was at the ATM and what popped up on the screen is "Feed me the cat." Yeah, that he found. I'm like, are you schizophrenic too? Like, is there another thing going on also? But he started going just berserk.
He started going absolutely apeshit, which is just, I know,
and it got even more and more ridiculous. One of the most ridiculous parts was when he killed that. I don't know if I should call her a hooker, but Christy, the lady he picked up and, said, you're known as Christy from now on. I will refer to you as Christy, and you'll refer to me as Paul Allen. But
was he trying, sorry to cut you off, but was he trying to make an alibi for like a Paul Allen story?
I think it started out that way, but then he was like,
no, I'm going to kill these people.
Or he just like lost track because his urges to do it doing that stuff were taking over, and maybe he had a plan at first, Otherwise, why would he be Paul Allen? Like, why would he ask them to call him Paul Allen?
There's a lot
and especially if he was going to videotape himself where he's very obviously not Paul Allen and show people that, or what? I don't know who he showed. He showed the girls that, or just
I'm assuming he shows people that videotape and probably some other very horrific videotapes,
and then kills them.
before he kills them,
so that it's like I'm going to show you this, but you're never going to tell anybody,
and also
nobody would believe you. No,
I think I'm kind of just trying to work out exactly all of this stuff in my head as I'm talking, because he'd converted Paul Allen's apartment or old apartment into like his murder dungeon where he had bodies strung up everywhere in every room. Like, am I right, or did I interpret that wrong?
No,
was that even Paul Allen's place? I don't know.
What was weird is it didn't, like, because when we initially saw Paul Allen's place and he got all pissy that it was better than his place, it was in a worse building that he was in. Like, the building he was in was bad. And he almost tried to replicate. I don't think it was Paul Allen's actual house.
Because he also said
apartment.
in the limousine, he was like, I have a new apartment. I think it might have been someplace else.
I don't know. But I don't think that was actually Paul. Because one, why would he have access to it if it's an active, like, crime scene or an active scene of, or it would be tampering with evidence, and why would he be staying there? It would put him under suspicion more than he already was. But the building it was in was not as high end as the original place we saw that was actually Paul Allen's house. It was different. So I think he took the name Paul Allen when he was committing these crimes, found a place that nobody would sniff around because it was already a low income place, and decided to make that his little dungeon because nobody would come poking around in there.
Yeah, that is probably what is to be the case.
And where did, like, if it wasn't all in his head, where did those bodies go? Who cleaned them out? Who painted the walls? And why did that just kind of get swept under the rug? Was it because it was a low income place and they're like, oh shit, this happens every week? No. That could be the case, but I don't think it is, because I think this is confirmed to be the first set of things that is not real. Like, it is confirmed not to be real just because he goes back to that apartment and those bodies aren't there, that the realtor lady is very sketchy with him. And I think that just shows to me that all of these murders were in his head. I honestly, we'll get into it. The only real one might have been Paul, because there was somebody that was actively, like, on his case, but anybody else that seemed to be murdered or disappeared, nothing was done about it. The only one that was being investigated was Paul. And
that was just because Paul disappeared.
Yeah. But that guy that at the end in the diner or where he went, that the guy that was supposedly his lawyer was talking to him, and he's like, I had dinner with Paul twice last week or something.
I don't think a single one of these murders is real or happened.
Then who was the detective that was investigating?
That was just Paul Allen disappeared, and I guess he came back. Honestly, the detective might not even be real now that I'm questioning it.
Green Goblin, he should have been the murderer. His face is he just looks like one. I'm sorry.
He had a lot of great smiles, and behind the smile you could see him, the clock's turning. I guess now that we've kind of brought it up, with the scenes, and there are multiple of them where Patrick Bateman is pretty much being cross-examined by the detective. And to my knowledge, while they were filming it, they filmed those scenes 3 times each. Once where Patrick was, he was confident and suave and the detective wasn't catching on at all. Another time where they were kind of midway. And then the third and final time where Patrick was just sweating and the detective pretty much knew, and he was showing that he knew. And they would interchange those scenes as it was going, so it would switch back and forth from Patrick being sweaty to him being suave, and I really, really like how they did that.
The card scene.
That's the best. The
business card scene, that was absolutely ridiculous, because he was like, they were comparing business cards. They all looked exactly the same, pretty much. It was like like gray black ink on white cardstock.
Oh, but Patrick's was on bone white.
I know, he was obsessed with bones and blood and meat. But they were all whipping out their cards, and then he was confident for a little bit, and then they pulled out one, and he was like, started sweating and getting angry, and then the last one he pulled out, he was like, oh, it's on the one. Like,
look at that subtle off-white coloring.
I know, and it's just like, what the hell are you? It's a business card. Who cares?
There's a lot of moments in this movie that have been memed. The end where he's like, why not, you stupid bastard? And the business card scene. And I think they have been rightfully so, because this movie is just, like we said before, it's a comedy. The editing shows it for sure. And there are interviews by the director talking about how it's a misunderstood comedy. But like the business card scene, if you take that in a vacuum, it's probably one of the funniest edited scenes in history.
It's just so ridiculous. He's sweating and getting all flustered and angry and internal monologuing about business cards that look almost identical.
They are the same. I'm pretty sure I haven't, but have I shown you the scene where it's the same business card scene, but they're showing each other cats? I obviously haven't. If you haven't seen that, go look it up on YouTube, because we will be after we're done recording. It's hilarious. Gosh. But I mean, just on the topic of this movie being a comedy, I think obviously there are gruesome murders, and obviously it is horrific at parts, but it's a dark comedy. You know, it plays into that really, really well.
It is kind of a dark comedy, but the only difference is the characters aren't in on it.
Yes,
they are genuine.
Right. Yeah.
Like, they are genuinely being this ridiculous. And the only people that are privy to it being a comedy and just ironic and satire is the audience. But also, there's not a single character in there that I connected personally with to care enough about any of the murders.
And I think, not that there's anything wrong with the structure of the movie or the way that it was presented. And like I said, I just think there are inherent flaws in the novel, and by bringing it into a movie, it's going to bring out those inherent flaws. But I think you're right. I think we could have used a POV character or someone to latch onto. Because, like, who am I going to care about?
I'm not going to care about Patrick. He's going nuts, and he's a jerk. Like, he's a Wall Street jackass. Why would I care?
And like I said, the only person who was normal, who I could kind of latch onto, was Jean. And so there was that one scene. But
she's a glutton for punishment. Yeah. Because she accepted the way he was treating her, and then was like, oh my god, he wants to date me. I'm like, yeah, so what? He goes and picks up random women to date anyway. They don't mean shit to him.
Yeah.
Like, and he has a fiance. Or had.
I don't.
And then dumped her, and then she tried to make a scene, and then as soon as he left, she was like,
oh, well, that didn't work.
Well, all right. That did not go my way.
Cheating on his fiance with someone who was always drugged up.
And he had assumed, which I'm pretty sure she was, but he also assumed that she was cheating on him with one of the other guys, but that was never confirmed in the movie that she actually was cheating on him. And it may have just been his perception and way of justifying what he was doing.
I think that's exactly what it is. Because as he says, this woman who I'm having an affair with is also having an affair with someone else. It's just because they're really close and talking as they're at the table.
Yeah.
So I fully think that Patrick just takes these conclusions and just runs with them.
He lives in his own world. Everybody else is just a side quest, a side character.
Absolutely.
But his world came crashing down around him, and then he confessed on a phone call to his lawyer saying, I killed people, man. I don't know what's going on. I was killing people. Like, that was a Jim Carrey scene.
And Christian Bale is absolutely killing it, because it's all one unbroken shot of him just on the phone.
And he's sweating.
And he's going back and forth from laughing to crying to just... He's hysterical. It's amazing.
True insanity.
And... I mean, we mentioned Jim Carrey-isms, but yeah, full on. His face is just contorting in ways that I didn't know were possible.
You're killing me, man. But, man, one thing that I compare it to whenever I watch a serial killer movie is when I've, like, watched clips of real serial killers being interviewed right before they're either like sentenced to death or when they get caught and arrested.
Right.
And there was one lady, she actually had a really sad story, was subject to a lot of abuse. I don't remember her name. Some people watching might actually remember who she is and like tell me the name again. But I saw her video and she was being interviewed the day before she was going to get put to sleep forever. And she, like, they asked her, the interviewer asked her, like, why'd you do it? And he's like, and she's like, well, what, like, I forget his name. I'm going to call him Scott. She's like, well, Scott, they kept letting me kill him. They kept letting me do it and getting away with it. She had nothing to lose. She didn't care. And they were like, you know what tomorrow is and how are you feeling about it? She's like, I'm okay with it. I accept it. I killed all of them. Yeah.
Fuck.
But, oh my, like, just watching, like, real life, actual serial killers talk about their like what they were doing, and then some of them refuse to talk about it as if they're keeping some sacred secret. But it's just interesting to watch that and compare it to what cinema portrays them to be,
because this is much more hyper realistic on purpose, because a lot of it isn't meant to even be real.
Most people can't, I mean, narcissists and sociopaths, psychopaths tend to be very good liars, and they do it all the time.
Oh yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that all of them are good at lying. They do it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all of them are going to be good at killing people meticulously, doing it as an art form and getting away with it, like the Zodiac killer, who was still never caught. But some people are saying the Zodiac killer was Gandhi. I don't know what.
I don't buy it.
I don't understand that at all. But I saw something about it saying like the timelines add up. When Gandhi was here, that's when all the killings happened, and then when he went back to India, all of a sudden the killings stopped. And I'm like, okay, that may be a huge coincidence, because if he was such a public figure, how would he have gotten away with that in his free time and just going, I'll be back. I'm going out to return some DVDs. No.
I gotta go return my videotapes.
I'm like, the ones you made of you just...
He says that at least half a dozen times.
It's his favorite excuse to get out of things and leave. He goes, I gotta go return some videotapes. And then he just leaves as if that's a good excuse for anybody to make.
But it works. It works for him.
Well, because nobody questions him because they're like, I don't believe you, but I'm not gonna question it because you're kind of freaking out.
But earlier you brought up like the Zodiac killer, and honestly I was even thinking like Jack the Ripper and all of these...
Oh, it was Jack the Ripper that they compared him to, not the Zodiac.
Oh, well, anyway. All of these old killers, I feel like they got away with it just because cops weren't very good at dealing with serial killers yet.
They were like, oh, that's a shame.
I mean, the whole Zodiac movie by David Fincher, if you've seen that, it's great. But it just highlights the reason why the Zodiac killer got away is because cops across state lines weren't working with each other, and that's it.
Yeah, that's likely the reason they never got caught. But also, the other thing that reminded me, or that made me think about the Zodiac killer, is he left encrypted notes after each thing. Like he made them known, and as far as I know, unless something is updated, nobody was able to decode them. Like nobody was able to figure out what they actually said. Apparently, like unless there's something that came up that they did figure it out eventually, but the last time I looked at it and watched, nobody was able to figure out what those letters actually meant. That's insane and what they said.
But I mean, I bring all that up because
they probably reveal who it is. They probably have like the whole spiel. It's probably his memoir.
I mean, it's probably just his manifesto, and it's random bullshit.
I don't know, because I don't know.
But anyway, I bring all that up because Patrick Bateman, I feel like, gets away with it just because it's in the 90s and it's in New York and it's such a seedy, terrible nightlife city that he's just able to get away with it from blind luck. He doesn't even try. Like, he is not a good serial killer.
Well, and you know what's sad is that is reality for a lot of times, because either people don't get taken seriously, like in Jeffrey Dahmer, the neighbor called and complained, made legitimate complaints, and the cops said, oh, fuck, I don't know. And literally one of them had to step just an inch further into the room and they would have seen the dead guy. And they just walked away and didn't care.
And that's
sadly, that's a real thing that happens, is and when
the more that I think about that, in the aspect of the American Psycho story, Like initially, I really don't like that. I almost found it lazy. But then, like I was saying, I thought about it for even just a second, and it's real because all of these serial killers, like some of them are really smart, and I guess it is really fun to see a really smart, genius, complex serial killer in a really cool story. But this is real, or as real as they want to make it
this
in a
guy's
comedy.
Completely scatterbrained. He's not like articulate.
No.
And he doesn't do like he in the phone call he admitted to try like cannibalism with certain things.
He tried to eat some brains and he was like, oh no, I didn't like it, because he's like throwing up.
Right. And then if you look at a real life serial killer like Jeffrey Dahmer, he was very meticulous and calculated in what he was doing. Maybe not at first, because he kind of panicked his first one and ground him up and was like, oh my god, I can't believe I did it, and he got away with it. But if you look at like real serial killers like that, who it's actually very, very, very uncommon for a serial killer to become a serial killer. Usually people get caught after they kill one person because they're good at covering it up. But just
the few that actually become serial killers, it's
rare and far and few in between. And I guarantee you the serial killers are not the only ones that have killed people or want to, or have that same complex of having that bloodlust, so to speak. And Patrick Bateman was one of those. He was not good at it. He got away with it by chance.
And chance alone.
And he was completely scattered. He was trying to fit into a society that he didn't fit into.
No.
And then he slowly fell apart.
Aside from putting down newspapers once, he had no plan whatsoever.
No, he chased a girl down the hallway naked with a chainsaw, and then watched her go down the stairs, and then happened to drop it at the right second, so it got on her, so it'd kill her at the very end, at the last step. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? She had to just walk like a few feet around to stay out of the way.
Or look up and be like, oh, I should stop running for a second because that chainsaw is about to fall on me.
Oh my
and she would have been fine.
I mean, I get you're terrified running from a murderer after what she saw, but at the same time, the odds of that happening, I mean, wouldn't it have been more likely for the handle to hit her, not the blade? Because
also,
it might be heavier or something
that
like that?
moment and Patrick shooting the police car and it exploding are meant to be so ridiculous and dumb that the audience thinks, wait,
it
this can't
me
be
of
real.
Scream.
Yeah, exactly.
Because really, the serial killer wearing a mask and the only weapon he has is a knife.
Yeah, that's
it.
Yeah,
like you really. I mean, granted, it was a long time ago and it wasn't real. It was a movie, but the fuck you mean you gets away with 82 of them? No. With that, they weren't even graceful.
In the first,
I feel bad for accusing Dewey the first time I watched that, because I was convinced that Dewey was the killer. For the first time I watched the series through, before we found out that he definitely wasn't. I felt so bad afterward when he was like actively trying to save people from the real murderers. I was like, I'm sorry, Dewey. You're just one of those people that looks like you would be a serial killer in
the scene where like Dewey is in the house and you were like, yeah, Dewey's the killer because he was in the house and then he disappeared. And then he walks out of the front door and he's got a knife in his back and you were like, Dewey, no, I'm sorry.
I was like, no, I'm sorry. I doubted you. Don't die.
And honestly, I kind of gaslit you into thinking that it was
You always
Dewey.
do that. Okay, for anybody listening to this, he gaslights me every time he shows me a movie and I happen to guess something right, which is frequently.
Well, it's
shut up. He gaslights me into believing what he wants me to believe, and then as soon as I'm proven right, when I initially was like, oh, this is what's happening, and I was right and he gaslit me into believing otherwise, he gives me this look out of the side of his eye like, I tricked you, and I'm like, stop it!
It's not
a jerk move.
Necessarily a gaslight, as it's...
Oh, it's gaslight.
If you ask me a question about something, I will... immediately be vague and probably point you in the wrong direction.
I know, you make me second guess myself.
I think it was when we were watching Scream, you initially were kind of suspicious of Dewey, and I just kind of lent into that suspicion.
He likes to fuck with my head when we watch things.
Yeah, it's only when we watch movies.
I know. Otherwise, he can't lie to me. He's tried. No, and it doesn't work. And it's only in movies that I second guess myself because I'm like, oh, he's seen it, but I can't tell if he's like, it's one of those situations where I'm like, oh, he's definitely fucking with me, and I'm like, wait, what if that's what he wants?
Yeah,
you
but
to
how
think
many
in
mind
reality?
games am I playing? How many bluffs are there? There could be 4 different double bluffs.
I know, and then in real life, I can see you lying from a mile away, like easy.
It's only when movies are involved.
I know, because you know that lie has no consequences other than me getting annoyed.
But is there much else to talk about with American Psycho other than we will get to the end, like ending, how the movie wraps up? But before we get to then, is there much else to talk about?
Not really. Not that I could think of. Like,
I mean, you got.
But who was that guy really his lawyer?
Yes.
Why did he think that was a joke?
Because, okay, this is my interpretation of the ending, and I could be wrong because there are plenty different explanations all contradicting each other. But I think the character that we see in this movie, first off, isn't as fit as we see him as, and also isn't Patrick Bateman.
Oh, yeah, he just took on... That's what we said at the end of the movie. I'm like, maybe he's not actually Patrick Bateman, and he's just is somebody that took over Patrick Bateman's life, or it's his alias or something like that, because he identifies as like 4 different people throughout the movie to different people. There
are many different moments where someone will be talking to him and using just a different name. The lawyer
called him a D name or something like that. He called him a different name, and he goes, "I'm Patrick Bateman," and his lawyer's like, "No, I'm gonna walk over there," and it makes me wonder, like, is Patrick Bateman just one of his other aliases? Because there are people that call him Patrick. Like, there are people that just
like he's Patrick.
Like, he's known to many people as Patrick. He's known to some people as somebody else. Like whoever, like Celia, like the first guy he killed, Paul, kept referring to him as somebody else, and he was talking shit about Patrick Bateman.
Was it Marcus or something?
Something like that. Yeah. And I'm like, wait, what?
So any of these
who are you?
aliases could be the real Patrick, but I also don't think any of those are real. Like, I think...
No, he just keeps stealing people's identities because he has no sense of self.
No, yeah. Like, he's just...
He's empty inside. He said, he's even said that he's like, there's nothing on the inside.
Yeah,
like, I look normal
I'm made
on the
of flesh
outside.
And everything.
Yeah, I'm made of this, but on the inside, I'm nothing. Nothing is there. And I'm like, I believe you.
It hasn't brought up.
I believe you.
It hasn't been brought up at all, but I figure I could talk about it. A lot of the monologues that Christian Bale has, like, obviously they're directly pulled from the book, so you'd need to put them in, and it explains a lot, but I feel like it's a bit too much of an explanation. You don't know this example, but there is a cut of the original Blade Runner that has Harrison Ford expositing a bunch of dialogue as it's happening in the scene, and then sometimes that's kind of what it feels like. It's not that bad though, but I think the entire ending and the way that like, you don't even realize that it's coming up. The movie just kind of ends. Like, it's very climactic, and then...
Well, you expect it to end in him getting caught and arrested, and then it just ends with him being rejected by his lawyer, or his lawyer walking away going, okay, man, yeah, whatever you say, and he just walks back to the table, and he goes, well, turns out I got away with it.
This confession means nothing. And there's even the part during his confession on the phone where there's like a helicopter outside, and it's got a spotlight, and you're like, this is it.
Well, and I don't even, honestly, it doesn't even seem like the helicopter was for him. It just happened to be there at the time he was running away from the cop.
Well, I also think that helicopter wasn't real.
Yeah, and he's hiding behind the desk calling his lawyer going, I killed people, man. Something's going on. Cheese is slipping off the cracker. I don't know what's going on, but I killed them, and then I tried to eat their brains, and it made me nauseous. Like,
He's just insane. He's losing it.
He's losing it. That cheese is off the cracker. It is gone.
So I guess the one question that I have to ask is, how much of this movie do you think is real? From none of it to all of it.
None of it. I don't think any of it really actually happened.
I'm with you.
Because it just doesn't make sense if all of it happened. Because either all of it had to have happened and everybody is oblivious, or none of it ever happened and he's just crazy, which also, is more likely.
I think mainly because it contradicts a lot of the Paul Allen stuff, but maybe the detective isn't real. Maybe that's in his head too. Maybe,
but the only thing is his secretary interacted with the detective and said, honestly, like, he's here for you.
We're on the track. We said none of it's real. His job's probably not even real.
Like, what if his dad is the head of a corporation and he just gave his crazy son a fake job to sit in with and to keep him occupied because he knew he was crazy and he was a troubled child?
That could be it. And that's what I kind of like about this movie. It's not the best movie in the world, but any of these options could be explanations for what actually happened.
Yeah, it's ambiguous. We don't know what happens. Like, we don't know if it was real. We don't know if it wasn't. We don't know any of it.
Is Patrick real? Is this person that we see real?
I honestly think the most real identity that we could see Patrick as is whatever his lawyer referred to him as.
Yes, because I'm blanking on that name, but
I know, I forget the name that he called him, but
I have seen...
That seems like, out of all of the names and aliases he's gone by, that seems like that would be the most reasonable to assume that's the real one, because a lawyer isn't necessarily a Wall Street guy. He thought it was a joke, and then he got really like, okay, man, whatever you say, when he was talking to him. So that made me feel like none of the murders were actually real. They were all in his head, and his lawyer was kind of aware that he's a nut job.
Yeah. He's like, this joke isn't funny anymore, because, like, as if he'd done this before.
Yeah, and it wasn't as serious to him because he seemed composed for a while before that. And one thing that would hint at that is at the beginning of the movie, he would say random disturbing things out loud and nobody took him seriously.
And it was like in a nightclub, so it could be explained that they just didn't hear him.
Well, but there were some times where he would say something out loud and they would hear him, or unless he didn't actually say it out loud, but there were times where he'd say that, and if they did hear him, they brushed it off and were like, whatever, man.
Or he would say, I murder and execute, or I'm into murders and executions, and they're like, oh, mergers and acquisitions, do you like that?
Yeah, and so that almost seems like everybody's privy to how crazy he is, and they just don't feed into it, and they don't take him seriously.
Or even we, as the audience, are hearing what he wants to say, whereas he's just saying the normal thing.
Yeah, that's the impression I got initially too, but it honestly caters to, when you get to the ending, you start to try and rationalize whatever you saw up until that point.
Right.
And the rational part of my brain is saying everybody kind of knows he's crazy. He said those things out loud. He's done this before. He's said stupid shit before that he thinks is real, and everybody just kind of plays along because they don't want to take him off. Or because he's the boss's son or something like that. Because he hangs out with the same people most of the time, like regularly.
Yeah. There's Justin
Thoreau. And he doesn't seem to do any actual work. He just goes out on lunches. So he has a fake job.
What even is his job? Wall Street something?
Don't know. It never says what he actually does for a living. I'm assuming his dad is the head of a company and he gave him some phony job because his son is like crazy.
That must be it. But we never even see his dad. We never see any of his family.
Because that would make it obvious what the reality is.
You're right, yeah. But yeah, out of 5 brownie points, what would you give the incredibly ambiguous American Psycho?
3.5.
That's higher than I thought you would give it.
Well, I just like it because it's ambiguous and it makes me think, and it doesn't have a definitive answer for why. Which I like. But at the same time, I was like, this is ridiculous.
Yes. I obviously like more definitive endings, but as far as ambiguous stories go, I still think there are better ones.
Coraline?
Yes.
Coraline's ambiguous because you think that she got out, but at the end, I don't think she did. I don't think she got out!
And that's what I think doesn't strike true for me with this movie is I think there's a way to make something feel definitive, and then as soon as you start thinking about it, then you realize, oh no, that was more ambiguous than I thought. And I kind of prefer that to the movie wraps up and you think, what the hell did I just watch? And I did like American Psycho, and I like it very much every
Mad
time
God.
I watch it. But yeah, Mad God. That
Mad
wasn't...
God, that is just...
We'll
You'll
need to
never
talk
know what
about
that
Mad
means.
God in an episode. If you don't know what that is, look it up.
Don't watch it. Just read
the poster
description.
will probably scare you enough.
Oh my god. If you watch it and you can make it through the entire movie, power to you. Because I did make it through the whole movie, but even as somebody who watches like disturbing movies and stuff like that, that was difficult.
And that's also with us being together. I feel like if either of us were alone, making our way through that movie would have been a lot more difficult.
It would have taken me a lot more sessions and a lot of alcohol.
Exactly. But we're not here to talk about Mad God yet. I guarantee you we will. We'll have to rewatch it maybe, I don't know, next October. I can't see myself watching it anytime soon. That movie is... You have
to have an entire weekend, watch it at the beginning so you have the weekend to just,
de-stress.
Slowly sanitize your brain. And then so you can be ready for the week.
But with that, this has been a girlfriend's glimpse into an American Psycho.
Dun, dun, dun.